And a happy Wednesday to you, Central Georgia. Hope the second day of your short work week and school week is off to a great start. We're just continuing with virtually the same forecast we've had for Monday and Tuesday, which is not bad by any means. Still a very pleasant and a very quiet stretch of weather after we have had many dreary periods in the month of August. So we're going to break down everything that you need to know, mainly focusing on those temperatures and talking about the humidity as well. Obviously, with a warm up in the temperature department, you're going to want to know if the humidity is going to make it feel really blistering hot for a change. But small rain chances do return, and that is starting as soon as this afternoon, really just past lunchtime. And when I mean small rain chances, I mean just about as small as you can get, really just looking at a couple of sprinkle showers that could be in the picture. But continuing to warm up day by day, and today will kind of be the first day that we're kicking off that warming trend as we head into the very end of your work week and into the weekend ahead. Temperatures will be back down next week, so yes, we are warming up and it is going to be warm this weekend. However, it's going to be very short-lived as we'll have another frontal boundary, and that's going to provide us with a reinforcing push of some cooler and drier air for the beginning of next week. So here's a look around the quad. We had plenty of cloud cover in the picture actually this morning, especially farther down to the south in areas like Dublin. Well, we're not getting a glimpse of much in the way of cloud cover anymore. You can see some just down to the southeast of Houston County, maybe a few right here directly to the east as we look over in that direction at the Georgia National Fairgrounds. Dublin and Macon, just seeing bright blue sky here just before the 11 a.m. hour. Here's a look at your temperatures. Actually, one lone upper 60 still remaining in the picture down in Warner Robins, and it does look like mainly in the lower 70s. Some areas are already into the mid and upper 70s, like 76 in Rochelle, 77 in Cordele. So 77 our warmest temperature here in Central Georgia. And once again, the main takeaway from this is below the 80-degree mark all across our temperature map. We have been so used to these temperatures in light of mostly sunny skies in the morning hours, especially during the summertime frame. They're already somewhere in the mid 80s, maybe even the upper 80s, and they're feeling somewhere like near the 90s and maybe near the triple-digit mark. That hasn't been the case for quite some time now. So 77 in Cordele, our warmest temperature. Down to the south, of course, you can spot many 80s, 81 in Jacksonville, 80 Panama City, 84 New Orleans, and 81s in Laredo and Houston, along with an 82 down in Orlando. We continue to see a lot of that cooler air still present up to the north and the northeast, but now we're kind of getting into a typical weather pattern. And obviously, many of these temperatures still hovering below average, but really just a lot of green and a lot of yellow shaded across the eastern United States. It's those coastal areas that are near the Gulf, that are near the Atlantic, that you're starting to see some of that humidity and some of those warmer temperatures remaining in the forecast, but it doesn't span up the Atlantic coast of Georgia, getting into South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, the Chesapeake Bay area. You're still seeing a lot of temperatures that are somewhere in the 70s, in the lower 70s at that, in areas like Virginia Beach, Washington, D.C., and of course, over here in the plains, getting up into the northern plains, that's where a lot of your cooler air still remains. Not only because that's just an area of the country that typically is cooler this time of year, but also due to the fact that they're a little bit later to see peaks of sunshine. Obviously, as you go across time zones, that sunrise does get a little bit later. So these areas are probably about an hour, maybe an hour and a half behind us in terms of when they got that first peak of sunshine this morning. And the Rocky Mountains, nice and cold with plenty of shades of blue right there across western Colorado and getting down into northern New Mexico. Here's a look at the dew point temperatures. We have seen a steady increase in these numbers, maybe into the lower 60s. Still not much of a talking point. We still see our fair share of areas. In fact, actually it's just one now, 59-degree dew point in Swainsboro. That is the only dew point temperature hovering below the 60-degree mark. But again, when you have dew point temperatures in the low 60s, that's good enough for the light green color to be very widespread. And it's really not sufficient humidity for maybe rain chances or maybe really anything in the way of those feels-like numbers being inflated in the positive direction away from what the actual temperature reads. So the state of Georgia still continuing to hold on to the slightly drier air. We are getting a bit more of an easterly breeze now as opposed to a northeasterly breeze that we had this morning. The patchy areas of the very muggy air remain in South Georgia, getting down into Florida and over to the west, still lingering in Mississippi and into portions of Alabama. Up to the north and northeast of us, it still looks like the last little impacts of that wedge front are continuing to be known in upstate South Carolina, getting into North Carolina, and especially the Appalachian Mountains. So your feels like numbers, pretty similar to what the actual temperatures are. Maybe some disagreement, and feels like 81 up in Forsyth. Overall, all of these numbers have been a very, very pleasant treat over this recent stretch of weather that we've had below average temperatures in the forecast, and maybe a bit of an error over here along the Georgia-Alabama line. We have seen that pop up in a very similar area before, but it's been the opposite story. It's been a very, very hot environment in areas. I do believe that's getting close to maybe LaGrange, the I-85 corridor, kind of creeping over into the Auburn area back into Alabama, but not pertaining to our forecast. But I did mention maybe a slight shift in the winds coming in from the east now, and it does look like anywhere from about a 3 to 5, maybe 7 mile per hour breeze in a select few areas, but none of those widespread blue or yellow colors like we did see as of the last 2 days. So the winds have subsided very steadily, just like we were talking about. We had some pretty gusty winds up to 20 to 25 miles per hour on Monday afternoon. And then as we went into Tuesday, just more of a steady breeze and occasional gusts up to 15 miles per hour yesterday. And now we don't see really anything in the way of winds. They're not going to play a significant role really whatsoever in our forecast. 84 for a high temperature yesterday, so that is 6 degrees below average and just 1 degree above what we hit on Monday, which was 83 degrees. 57 for the low. So I did tell you that we matched the record yesterday back in 1934, which is where 57 degrees was originally recorded for yesterday all time. But once again, hit it in 1999, and now 2025 does join that list. So pretty crazy that we at least matched a record. We got really close to that as of last week, but it was a bit of a rounding issue, even though we were seeing some 57s recorded. But this time 57 did actually get recorded. So we did match a record, and just really goes to show and reiterate the message that this is pretty atypical for this time of year. There's only a select few times that we've gotten this low with your morning low temperatures all time since we started taking records. So maybe about the third or fourth time that we've actually ever done that. And once again, a very pleasant treat, a bit of a premature taste of fall, but we will obviously take it because definitely don't want to see these kind of numbers. The record high, 102 back in 1957. We haven't even sniffed the 100 since we went through that stretch where we were in the upper 90s, and we actually did record 1 or 2 days that did cross the threshold of the 100 degree mark. But average around this time of year, right at 90 degrees for your high temperatures and your low temperatures somewhere around 68. We'll talk about our warming trend and how it's going to relate to those specific numbers after we go through future view. No rain recorded yesterday. Your departure of rain falls below 7 inches, but overall that is still a very significant number above average for this time of year. Sunrise yesterday, 7:10 a.m. and then sunset 7:58 p.m. So I believe it was Monday that was our first pre-8 p.m. sunset, and we're going to continue to watch that number or that time get earlier and earlier, and then before you know it, we're going to be a couple months into the future, and that sun is going to be setting maybe around 5:30 in the evening hours, which I know many of you don't like, but me personally, with the early wake-up call, I really do enjoy an earlier sunset because it makes it dark a little bit earlier when I'm heading to bed sometime around 7 p.m. every night. So another pleasant start to today, nothing to really write home about besides some passing cloud cover, but now that has transitioned into a mostly sunny forecast and mostly dry today. And I say mostly dry, not entirely dry, because I do think a select few areas could see a stray sprinkle shower, and it may be so light that you really don't even notice it. It may be so light the satellite and radar doesn't even pick it up in nature, but it's still, or we still do have the potential for maybe catching a very short-lived shower, and it's not going to amount to much besides a couple water droplets to help you wash off the bugs on your windshield from all your Labor Day travels this past weekend. 86 degrees for a high temperature, so 4 degrees below average, still continuing with the below average trend. But remember, 83 on Monday, 84 yesterday, now 86 today. We are seeing a steady increase in those high temperatures day by day, and that is going to continue as we go into the beginning or the end of the work week, and the beginning of your weekend forecast. So let's talk about those heat indices. Are we going to feel any warmer than the actual temperature today? Well, just like we were talking about yesterday, maybe 1 or 2 degrees of fluctuation, but overall it is going to be a fairly nice afternoon paired up with these mostly sunny skies. And along with that, maybe more so today on the warmer side. We are seeing these numbers get pretty close to the 90-degree mark. And then once you cross the threshold of 90, I would kind of classify it as a bit of a hot day, but these are going to be some fairly warm temperatures this afternoon, because I always talk about it, weather is relative to what you have been feeling, and what you've probably been used to as of the last 2 to 3 weeks have been high temperatures in the 80s, maybe down in the 70s, plenty of rain, plenty of cloud cover. So obviously this would be kind of the warmest, one of the warmest numbers that we've seen in about the last 2 weeks. Here's your satellite and radar picture. Nothing to write home about once again. All that cloud cover we had present down towards the south in central Georgia this morning has dissipated and continues to thin out. Don't think we spot anything in the way of rain in the state of Georgia for yet another day. Looks like there are some showers up here in very southwestern North Carolina. Probably some rain and some thunderstorms back over to the west, but we're not seeing those because the radar is a little bit too far away to pick up on what's going on 2 states over back into Mississippi. So let's play it through Future View. This is a new model run, so every time that you tune into this extended forecast, we are getting a new update of the Future View model runs, this graph model. It looks like we go through most of this afternoon without rain, but there are going to be a couple of green dots that try to pop up very briefly. It's just going to be a very short-lived light shower if you do see anything in the way of rain. And some of those will try to linger into the nighttime hours, but overall, you're probably not going to experience anything in the way of rain today, maybe through tomorrow, and maybe all the way through Friday. It's still a very tame and a very mild forecast, not even much in the way of cloud cover. So let's go into your Thursday afternoon, trying to jump back in the work week. Definitely don't want to do that. Just past lunchtime at 2 p.m., you can see scattered showers and even a couple of pockets of storms farther up to the north. Once again, the rain chances are going to be a lot better up in the northern portion of the state of Georgia. So if you have any travel plans for work that do pertain to you going up into North Georgia or just north of us here in central Georgia throughout your Thursday afternoon, you could run into a stray shower, maybe even a short-lived storm, but it does look like a couple of passing light showers could be the story throughout your Thursday. Again, if I went according to this specific model run, I would probably go 10% chance of rain on Wednesday to cover the bases for anyone that really does experience a very minuscule shower, and then maybe a 20% chance of a light shower, but we continue to see a little bit of fluctuation. Overall, 10 and 20% chances of rain are not very impressive whatsoever. But now let's go into Friday, because this is probably what a lot of you want to know about. You're probably just dragging along in this short work week. You're still hanging on to all the fun that you had this past weekend. But going into Friday, you have weekend plans to look forward to, and that's going to get started with football on Friday night all across central Georgia. Well, don't be surprised if you have a very light and a very brief shower that could be in the picture, mainly in the late afternoon and early evening time frame. I think once the sun does begin to set right there around 8 p.m., that's when we're going to look at the rain chances to go away. So the rest of your football Friday night, as you go into the third and fourth quarters, maybe even some overtimes that we have for some games, it's going to be a more pleasant picture. And Future View goes all the way out to Saturday at 3 a.m. We'll pick it up with the long-range models and talk about your weekend rain chances after we go through the next couple of days. So 86 for a high temperature on Wednesday that we were talking about, low of 61 tomorrow morning. So still having that cool feeling in terms of the cooler temperatures that welcome you out the door. That's going to be right there around the 7 a.m. hour, getting just around when the sun does begin to rise. 89 for a high temperature on Thursday. So I mentioned it yesterday. I think we could definitely bounce back to the 90-degree mark as soon as Thursday. So 89, definitely getting very, very close to that number. And you see the 10% chance of rain. I just told you that if we were to go according to the latest model run of Future View, I would probably bump that up to 20%, but still a 10 or a 20% chance of a light shower or a sprinkle each and every day. And it is, I would put a lot more money on the fact that you're probably not going to see anything in the way of rain. The main thing you'll want to know is the temperatures that you have in store. As we go into Friday, maybe a few more clouds in the picture, but overall 92 for a high temperature is going to be the big story. So obviously football Friday night, we finally don't have that much in the way of impressive rain chances, but it is going to result in a slightly warmer night as you do make your way out to the field. 92 for a high temperature, maybe slightly more humidity in the forecast. We'll have to check in with that muggy meter after we go into your afternoon highs and morning low temperatures to see if the humidity is going to influence what any of these numbers feel like. But we don't stop at 92. How about 94 on Saturday afternoon? and then we drop the number back down to 90. So that does look like a good indication of at least a cooling trend. And it continues to go past that as we go into Monday and Tuesday. You'll have to stay to look forward to that. And going into your morning low temperature, still right there around the 60-degree mark, but then more so mid-60s and closer to the 70-degree mark to start Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Now, normally some of these warmer temperatures are associated with plenty of cloud cover in the morning, and by the time we get into Saturday and Sunday, it very well may be. But Friday, it just looks like the general warming trend is going to continue. But pretty good jump, 61 up to 66 between Thursday and Friday. It's still going to feel pleasant. Don't get me wrong. Anytime you're below the 70-degree mark to start out the mornings is going to be a very good thing. But maybe not just having that bit of a fall feel in the air as we go towards the weekend. But then as we go into next week, we could be talking about some much cooler temperatures arriving once again. So here's a look at your humidity day by day. It is a pretty consistent, maybe steady uphill climb, but overall dew point temperatures are expected to hang out in the 60s. Over the last couple of days, we've seen some fluctuation about what specifically those dew point temperatures will be at. Overall, it doesn't look terribly muggy, but once we get into the weekend, it may be enough to influence the feels like number of about 1 to 2, maybe 3 degrees above the actual temperature. And then as we go into Monday and Tuesday, take a look at that drop off. So it does look like some drier air is going to filter in, and we did get indications that Saturday to Sunday, we will see a steady temperature drop of 94 down to 90. Can we continue to follow that up with some more cooler air in the forecast along with the drier air that is anticipated towards the beginning of next week? And I think, honestly, we may be a little bit earlier to have that drier air inserted into our forecast, because take a look at this. This is your frontal boundary moving in towards the end of the weekend. This is Saturday, late afternoon into the evening. It looks like some scattered rain chances are trying to move into the northern portion of Georgia, but it doesn't look like too much comes to fruition in the way of rain throughout Saturday, but still it may be a forecast once we can view it on our short range and our higher resolution graph model that you may want the rain jacket handy just in case you come across a stray shower. Now Sunday, it does look to be a bit messy as you close out the weekend, so kind of the opposite of what we had the last 2 weekends. Friday and Saturday have been very rainy days, very dreary days, quite messy. You haven't wanted to have too many outdoor plans. Well, a bit of a flip-flop this weekend. So it looks like Saturday into Sunday as we close out the weekend could be a bit messy in terms of your forecast with plenty of rain chances. Wouldn't even rule out your fair share of scattered showers, maybe even a storm or two, especially given what the long range models say as of right now. We'll get a better idea as these pop up on our shorter range, high resolution future view models, which would be the graph and which would be the HRRR model run, the HRRR, that we don't typically show too much unless we're really seeing a lot of model disagreement and we're trying to get a better idea, pair up the graph and see how it does compare to that high resolution model. But still, as we wrap up the weekend, it could be on a bit of a messy note. Hopefully you don't have too many plans. Maybe your plans are just to sit inside and watch that first Sunday of NFL football, and it's going to be a nice forecast to do so. Maybe even work in an afternoon nap into the picture as well. Going into Monday, scattered rain chances are still all around the southeast. Will they pop up over central Georgia, or will they not? There's not too much agreement. I'm still maintaining about a 20% chance of rain as we go into the beginning of next week. But we did see that indication that drier air is going to filter in. That frontal boundary is going to start to move through on Saturday. It's going to kind of stall over us on Sunday, but then it's going to steadily creep farther and farther down towards the south. And if it does get even farther to the south of us, and that's where it does remain stationary, that's where the rain chances are going to be better. So that's why you see a very messy picture over the entire state of Florida. Maybe back over here to the west of us, it looks like this frontal boundary could be draped across the Florida Peninsula and then maybe move a little bit upward into those Gulf Coast states of Louisiana, Alabama, and Mississippi. But back here at home, it does look like mainly just some predominantly cloudy skies. So not only are we anticipating some cooler and drier air to usher in, it also looks like the cloud cover will help keep those temperatures a little bit cooler by the time we roll into the beginning of next week. And then Wednesday, GFS is hinting at widespread rain. I imagine that's not going to be there, probably around this time tomorrow. But let's check in on the tropics because we have continued to monitor this wave over here just to the west of Africa. Right now it is located just to the southwest of the Cape Verde Islands. So this is in the far east Atlantic Ocean. This is still a very long ways away from the United States and us here in Georgia. So you can see it still maintains this red shade that it did have at this time yesterday, and the chances of development have not wavered. 30% chance of developing over the next 48 hours and a high chance of developing over the next 7 days. So it does look like it's going to be past that 2-day window that this system maybe tries to get its act together and form into our next named storm. But 70% chance of developing over the next 7 days. I imagine we'll continue to see both of those numbers go up very gradually, and it does look very likely that we will have our next named storm in the 2025 hurricane season. And that would be Gabrielle. So obviously I have the list of names right here. You will see that we crossed off Fernand just about last week. I do believe it was probably around this time that Fernand was continuing to move up into the North Atlantic and really not having too much more of a lifespan. But we've crossed off 6 names so far. Gabrielle would be the 7th named storm of the year. And this is the only area that we have monitored for potential development down in the tropics. What this system does past that shaded area is anyone's best guess. But we do have a series of fronts coming through and kind of stalling off the Atlantic coast, maybe down into Florida. Hopefully those can act as good steering mechanisms to send whatever does come trucking our way back out to sea, maybe curve up to the north like Aaron and like Fernand did, both around kind of the east Atlantic coast of the United States. But here's a look at your 7-day forecast. We don't need to worry about anything tropical right now. We just want to continue to make sure that you're staying informed and staying up to date with all of those potential tropical systems this time of year. 7-day forecast is really highlighted by the warming trend, but I was describing it as a pretty clean roller coaster ride this morning. We continue to go up the roller coaster, and then we hit the climax, the peak of it right here, and then we go all the way down, not only to 90, but we bounce down into the lower 80s for the beginning of next week. 83 degrees on Monday, 82 next Tuesday. And like I said, that's going to be due to the combination of cooler and drier air filtering in behind the frontal boundary that tries to pass through sometime on Sunday, and then also maybe even some increased cloud cover. But I've given the general kind of partly cloudy icon with the thunderstorm on it because right now it does look like maybe our humidity could be slightly higher. It could be more conducive for maybe a few low-end storms, but none of this is going to be anything in the way of severe weather. We just don't quite have the ingredients suitable for anything in the way of severe weather, and we've really gone a very decent stretch without dealing with any kind of severe weather besides the potential for some flash flooding when we had those very dreary stretches. But the rain chances, very typical of a summertime day. And obviously, I know we're into the month of September now. Once you get into all those months at the end of the year that end in BER, those BER numbers, or those BER months, that's when you start to think about the cooler temperatures. We definitely could see another warmer spell just because our temperatures have been below average for a good time period. Obviously doesn't mean they can't warm up like what we see this weekend. I definitely think Saturday is probably going to be a pretty hot afternoon, especially if we don't have much in the way of clouds or anything in the way of rain chances. But a high temperature of 94, and I think Saturday is kind of that last day that we hold on to whatever humidity we have whatsoever before they go back down to more reasonable levels. And we really start to see that dry air inserted into the forecast. But 20% chance of rain is nothing to fret about whatsoever. You have outdoor plans this weekend, continue to keep them, but have a contingency plan in case you come across a stray shower like we always tell you. It's better to prepare for the worst and hope for the best. But in terms of your weekend plans, obviously many of you looking forward to it, really just wanting to tune back out of work after you did have a nice long 3, maybe even 4-day weekend for the Labor Day holiday. It does look like we do have rain chances, but they're not looking near as widespread as what we had last Friday and for last Saturday morning. And some of these temperatures, well, if you're really wanting some of that summertime heat, trying to enjoy that last little bit of summer, it does look like this weekend is going to be very conducive if you did miss the heat. But if you're a cooler weather lover like myself, at least tomorrow morning, I turned the wrong way. Tomorrow morning is going to be a very pleasant morning, and you're still going to feel maybe a bit of that fall chill in the air. And then we will drop the numbers back down as we go into next Monday and Tuesday to hopefully continue the below average trend well into next week. And the farther and farther we continue to have these numbers in the 80s for September, that means less time that we do have in order to warm back up. But we very well could see another warm spell in the 90s, even as we go into the middle of September, even as we go into the end of September. My kind of rule of thumb, like I've mentioned to you over the last couple of days, is once we get into the end of the Georgia National Fair, the kind of that first and second week of October, that should be the last window that we really see any temperatures in the 90s being possible, and then we'll really settle into the fall season a couple weeks after the official start, which will be on September 22nd, but who is counting in terms of that? And we are a little bit less than a month away from the Georgia National Fair kicking off on October 2nd. So a lot to look forward to, and as we officially transition into a cooler time period, I will be working to get some fall graphics ahead for you, maybe talk about some of the temperature trends we see during the fall time frame, and along with that, something that many of you probably want to know are those fall foliage updates. Yes, when are those leaves going to start to turn those beautiful yellow, orange, and red colors? Well, we'll be working towards that, but we have a stretch of kind of holding on to that last little bit of summertime weather before we do get there. So that'll do it for your extended forecast here this Wednesday. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll be back once again 10:30 sharp on your Thursday morning to break down everything you need to know as we head close